Welcome back to Mike's Moment of Season 2. I'm your host, Michael Sean Harris, and today we continue our journey into creativity, expression, and the power of story. This is episode 3, Dramatic Exploration, and I'm thrilled to sit down with someone whose artistic path has taken him across continents and through some of the most dynamic corners of the performing world. Actor and Jamaican creative force Marcus James. From his early days performing in The Lion King in the UK to his breakout appearance on Game of Thrones to carving out a thriving acting career in Hollywood, Marcus brings a rare combination of discipline, vulnerability, and bold imagination. Today we'll explore his artistic evolution from our days together as members of the Little People and Teen Players Club and in Ashe to being in LA now and his work towards producing his own project. So settle in for a rich and inspiring conversation. This is Mike's Moment of Season 2, Dramatic Exploration. Welcome, Marcus.
Thank you. I love that intro, man. Love it, love it, love it. Amazing. I feel honored, honestly, to be able to, speak with you and share stories and, stuff like that.
Yeah, man. I'm so happy that you said yes and that we've been in touch, about the various things that you're doing.
Absolutely.
I'm so proud of you.
Thank you.
Happy for you.
Likewise. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's start. We won't even start with Little People and Teen Players and Ashe. Let's start after that.
Okay.
What happened? How did Lion King come about?
Right. So this is a very interesting story. So I went to the UK to study film production, right? So I finished my degree at the University of Bristol, ended up directing a film called A Good Call, which made it to the top 5 of the Fuji Film Festival in the UK, which is where I think it was a festival where they had entries from all the universities in the United Kingdom that had a film course. And out of all of those schools, hundreds, mine came, I think we finished 4th in the whole thing. And I was a director, and I remember being interviewed on television in Bristol, up and coming film director and writer Marcus James. I was like, that's interesting. Okay, so and that actually loops right back to what I'm doing now, which is interesting. But after I finished that degree, I was planning to head back to Jamaica. I was working as a television editor for a while after my degree, and I was heading back to Jamaica. A few weeks before I was due to go back to Jamaica, I got a call from someone I hadn't spoken to in ages by the name of Robin Carr.
Yes.
And Robin said, Marcus, they're looking for people for We Will Rock You, the musical, right? So I said, okay. I said, what's the date? Blah, blah, blah. I prepared my stuff. I still had time. Went in and I sang for them. Just so happens that the casting director for We Will Rock You is the same casting director for The Lion King. So I remember everything about that. I sang a Queen song, because We Will Rock You, I think, used a lot of Queen's music and stuff.
Right. Okay. It was
Bohemian Rhapsody is what I sang.
Okay.
Yeah. So the casting director took me out of that casting. It went well, but she pulled me aside and she said, hey, I have another show that, they're looking for performers. And that's how I ended up auditioning for The Lion King. So I went in and I sang for them. I was originally up for the part of Simba understudy.
Okay.
And it got down to me and another guy by the name of Matt Henry. I remember all these things vividly because the stories are so interesting. Anyway, so it got down to myself and Matt, and they were looking for a decider because they couldn't decide. Matt was already in the show. So they had a dance call, and they called both Matt and myself in to the dance call. But Michael, by the time I got into the dance call, that was like the 10th audition. I was like, you know what?
Oh my God.
I'm going to get this. And so what I did, I went in there and I killed it. Matt didn't turn up for the dance call.
Oh
So
wow.
what happened was that they needed dancers, and I was very strong. I was like doing jumps and turns
Of
and
course.
everything.
Yeah.
And they're like, let's. So they gave me the dance role and gave Matt Simba understudy. I only know this because Matt came up to me 6 months into the contract, and he said, "Do you know they were going to cast you as Simba understudy?" But you were so good in the dance call, they put you as a dancer. So I remember that story vividly. Matt and I have stayed in touch, and it's worked out great anyway. But that's just one of the interesting points. With regards to the Lion King, I didn't realize it at the time, but I think I'm probably the first fully Jamaican trained performer to have been cast in the West End production of The Lion
Okay.
King. Because
Hmm.
a point that I always make is that was I only trained in Jamaica in terms of my
Yes.
my performing arts training, and that's something that's I carry that like a badge of honor. So that's basically how I got into The Lion King, and after that, I did a year, and I took a leap of faith. I After I left The Lion King, I did not have a job lined up, but while I was there, like a few months before the end of the contract, I started doing auditions for other productions, and I kept on getting jobs. So
Okay.
it evolved, and I did shows with English National. I did a production called Gaddafi, A Living Myth. I Yeah, in very interesting show. I did several shows with Royal Opera as an actor, doing
Hmm.
stage combat and lots of movement and stuff like that. I did a year's contract of Aida
Okay.
with them, and I landed the lead role of Arjuna in a
Okay.
production called the Mahabharata, which was staged at Sadler's Wells, which is
Got
one
it.
of the biggest theaters in the UK
Mhm.
and in
I
Europe,
remember
really.
when that happened. Yeah.
Right, and there's a story behind that as well. But that marked a shift in my career from a more movement slash dance oriented career to acting because
Okay.
I was cast as the lead. Even though I went into that audition to audition as a dancer,
Hmm.
as I was walking out, they actually held me back and said, "We're looking for this character. Can you sing? Can you act?"
Hmm. Hmm.
I sang and I acted. They gave me the script on the spot. I went outside and I memorized it in half an hour. Went back in, and the next day they called and said, "We know you came into audition as a dancer, but we'd like to offer you the lead." And
Hmm.
that was a huge critical turning point for my
Wow.
for my
Okay.
career trajectory. Yeah.
What was that? What was the highest? I mean, there are probably several high points, or maybe instead of asking for the highest, give me like two or three high points. Being in the UK, being in theater,
hmm
um, what are a few other high
I
points
remember
of
these
that?
distinctly. Absolutely, I have them. I have the answers. No, because I know I think about it all the time. The very
Yeah.
first time my foot touched the stage for the Lion King, like literally, as my foot touched the stage for the first performance, I
Mhm.
said, I feel accomplished. And the reason I said that is because it's in relation to dance.
Mm,
Because I said before heading to the UK, I was training with Little People Ashe like Cadco, with Lanton and
right.
Steins. And
Hmm.
when I went on stage for The Lion King, I was like, I now feel as if I have satisfied something in myself with regards to dance. And I will continue to dance, but I also know that I have now given myself the freedom to explore other aspects of my career.
Hmm.
So that's one. Doing The Lion King was a huge achievement for me, even if I was going to be Simba understudy and I auditioned myself out of that role. But
Hmm.
that one. And
Right.
also landing the lead role of Arjuna in the Mahabharata because that was such a crucial turning point.
Hmm.
I went from a, in that instance, I went from a dance career to being a leading actor on one of the biggest stages in Europe. It was so abrupt and it just like
Hmm.
boom, boom. And the same thing with, I know you want to talk about theater and, I'm going to focus on that, but also it was the same thing with Game of Thrones. It was literally like a shift in the reality of a timeline. Very
Right.
interesting.
Yeah. Of
And
course.
then
Yeah.
the other aspect, I think, for theater would have been Aida with Royal Opera. It is undoubtedly one of the most difficult theater contracts I've ever done
How
in
so?
my life. We had I was cast as a warrior, and they cast 10 warriors, right? And it was the director was Sir David McVicker, who is a pioneer, and he has these extremely interesting interpretations of opera classics. So he set Aida, which is traditionally set in Egypt, and which was in the storyline set in Egypt, but he cast samurai warriors in the middle of that setting. It
Interesting.
worked
Okay.
brilliantly for the
Hmm.
storyline, but I was one of the 10 samurai warriors, and in fact ended up being one of the lead samurai warriors because I was in the front for every single routine and every single piece that we did.
Hmm.
It was difficult because before rehearsals even started, we had 3 months of intense training with a Shaolin monk. Well, they brought him over from China,
Hmm.
and he came down and he really put us through a boot camp, which was extremely intense. We did Japanese sword fighting, we did martial arts training, we trained in Qigong, we had a fitness course. Well, first of all, the first audition for the show was an obstacle course in
Okay.
which we had to climb on a rope. So whoever could climb up the fastest and slide down the fastest, you got points for that. And I, at that time, was primarily working as a dancer, but because I also had some stage combat training, I was lumped in with guys who were like third degree black belts in karate.
Hmm.
And so it was quite intense because there was no holding back in the rehearsals. When we were doing the fight scenes, every single day, it actually felt as if we were in battle every
Wow.
single day.
Yeah.
Um, and 3 months of that Monday to Friday was grueling, but extremely rewarding at the same time. So we did the first contract was 6 months,
Hmm.
and then the show was extremely successful. We had a break for like 2 months, and then they renewed the contract. And honestly, Michael, before the second contract, I actually sat in my room and I was like, "Oh my gosh, can I really go through that again?" And I did. I
Okay.
did. I made the decision to do it, and the second contract was harder than the
Hmm.
first one.
Wow.
Because in the second contract, I also got a solo role with the female dancers and with the lead opera singer. So I had a whole
Hmm.
routine where I had to like catch these girls one by one. Like it was about 10
Hmm.
of them, and I had to catch and then throw and then catch, and it was a lot. But it's one of the most rewarding contracts I have ever done, and I'm glad I did the two contracts of Aida.
Awesome. So this is a well, I don't know if it's a weird question, but with acting, with stage and film, all these
Hmm.
things, they're often looking for a particular look or
Hmm.
a particular build or particular accents. Um, how do you feel, you being who you are, how you look, how you speak, how you can even code switch if you need to.
Hmm.
How do you
Yeah,
think that has worked in your favor, and in what
massively,
ways has it worked in your favor, if it has?
massively, massively. I am very aware that my look is more on the ambiguous end, and as such that gives me the opportunity to be cast as many different people from many different ethnicities, from people from different backgrounds, etc. For Aida, it's obviously set in Egypt, even though I was a samurai warrior
Mhm.
in the production. They went with the theme of the Egyptian look, but it was set in London, so that
Right.
meant Egyptian, meaning an interpretation of an Egyptian look, which means that a lot of the guys were actually Italian or Spanish and
Right.
this
Hmm.
this this kind of thing. And then there was me. Then the Mahabharata is an Indian tale, but it's set on stage, and I guess once they put the dots, they had a red dot right here on
Yeah.
stage. You can't
Yeah.
really tell the difference
Instant
because
Indian. Yeah.
yeah, and the shaved head and everything is
Yes.
just very ambiguous. Is
Right.
he could be Indian, he could be
Yes.
North Indian,
Yeah.
and I actually had some of the audience comment on this, and it was then that I realized what that what it looked like on stage because a lot of them it appealed a lot to the Indian community. So we did after Sadler's Wells we had a tour. So we went to Birmingham, Manchester. I remember in Birmingham, there was a whole bunch of Indian ladies that came to the not to the dressing room but backstage, and they saw me and said, "Oh wow, oh you're not Indian. Oh we thought you were Indian." And I was that happened like two or three times. So
Yeah.
it's been a running theme in my career, to be honest, and it's something that I embrace fully,
Yes.
and it's something that I actually use to my advantage. I just keep things as neutral as possible, as
Hmm.
with regards to my look. I
Yeah.
don't try to pitch it in any particular direction, so that producers and directors, when they see me, they can freely imagine me as who they want to cast me as.
Right. Exactly.
Um, for the for Game of Thrones, the casting for that, they were looking for North Africans, Middle Easterns,
Hmm.
ethnically ambiguous and mixed race
Hmm.
guys. It was very specific. They were looking for somebody with an olive complexion or thereabouts, shaved head, muscular, athletic, and about 5'10", 5'10" to 6'10". When I read it, I was like, I think that's me, So I grew up in Jamaica, but the fact that I am Jamaican doesn't play. It's I don't think about it when I'm looking at the castings.
Right.
I'm
Right.
thinking about who I need to be, and because of the ambiguity of
Hmm.
my look, I oftentimes have to find different interpretations for different characters from different parts of the world. So the way that I navigate that, having not grown up in these specific cultures, I mean, my family background is mixed anyway.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
So
Hmm.
I grew up with a lot of elements. I grew up with the Hispanic elements. I grew up with the Jamaican culture. I grew up with European, British culture, this kind of thing.
Hmm.
And obviously in Jamaica also, we had Cuban teachers, Arsenio Andrade,
Hmm.
um, Honor van Omeren, who was from Netherlands, etc. So even in Jamaica, apart from my own family, I was exposed to people from different cultures. And what I started to do was that I would consciously um, analyze and look at people's behavior. So, I have a friend from Puerto Rico. I would listen to the way they speak. I have a friend from Puerto Rico who grew up in New York. I'd listen to the language. I have
Hmm.
friends in London. You have the urban London accent. You have the RP accent. I'd listen to it. And the interesting thing is that going slightly on a tangent, but the interesting thing is that the urban British accent is actually very Jamaicanized.
Yes,
And
because there's a
so,
big
yeah,
influence. No.
the
Yeah.
huge influence. So,
Yeah.
when you're talking to guys, like, well, go on, blood. Yeah, blood.
Yeah.
You're
A
right,
man
mate.
them.
You're right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Man them in
Yeah.
it. Man them in it. Hey, hey, hey.
Yeah.
You get me. Stuff like that.
Yeah.
So I remember I went up for a film in London called Reunion, and I landed the lead role next to Ashley Walters, who's doing quite well himself. And
Hmm.
I needed to be that person that, you'll get me, bro. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
You're right, mate. Yeah, 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 yeah. You work a lot, don't you? Yeah, man. Yeah, man. So I needed to become that person. And I didn't realize that I had picked up on those mannerisms so well until I was in the casting. And
Okay.
he gave me the script, and he's like, yeah, the guy's from the estate, and he's this mixed race guy, and blah, 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 blah. And by that time, I'd lived in London for quite a while, so I had the image in my head, and I just started to be this character. You coming home quite late, innit? Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. That's your girl, yeah? That's your girl, yeah. What's her name, man? Yeah, yeah, yeah. Stuff like that. So
Right.
and I landed the lead role, and that was that. And it's the same template that I've used for other castings.
Mm-hmm.
The
Mm-hmm.
Spanish Harlem accent, the RP accent, this, that, and the other. So I just observe, and I take from different observations, and I apply them within myself. It just
Right.
means that when I get a casting, I have to consciously look on to see what the ethnicity of the character is, so
Right.
that I can then start to
Kind
formulate
of
an
morph
opinion on this person and
morph into
to
that.
morph into this person. Yeah, and
Yeah.
yeah. So that's the interesting part of that dynamic of my career,
Right.
for sure.
Great. I love that.
Hmm.
Um, how did the Game of Thrones opportunity come about? Because that was a big thing. Yeah, it was a big.
Huge,
Yeah, it was massive.
huge. Yeah, I mean, I well, I got the casting from my agent at that time. I was with an agency called Leading Role Agency, and I'd been doing castings, but I was also signed with a commercial modeling agency called Sports of Seb SOS, and I was doing very well. I'd booked like campaigns for Nokia and Heineken, and I was working in theater, but also working as a commercial model, and it was going really, really well.
Oh, great. Okay.
I wanted to be a film and television actor, but it wasn't something that I didn't get up every morning and think about it. I got the castings, and I was doing the castings, and I was open to the possibilities.
Mm-hmm.
And then I got a casting for a show, and they were looking for, as I said before, North African, Middle Eastern, mixed race,
Mm-hmm.
5'10" to 6 foot, muscular, athletic, shaved head. And I was like, I think I have a chance.
Yeah.
I think I have a really good chance with this. And it was only the night before the audition, because they were, being quite secretive about it, that I found it was Game of Thrones.
Mm.
And so um, I watched clips of the show, I think on YouTube at the time, and I formulated a plan. Um,
Okay.
the scene that I did for the casting was the death scene, when I get my throat slit, and that's
Yeah.
that's what we did. So in my head, I was like, how can this play out? Like, how can I do this and show strength but immense vulnerability at the same time? And for the strength, what I did was that I decided to put it in not only my mannerisms, but my body spoke for itself, because I work out a
Mm-hmm.
lot, and I'm quite athletic.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
but I didn't want to overplay that. So what I did was that I wore a form-fitting shirt, but it wasn't a short sleeve shirt. It was a long sleeve shirt, form-fitting, so you could see the physique, but the physique wasn't overbearing. So the
Right.
physique wouldn't overshadow what I needed to do in terms of showing the vulnerability of the character.
Mm-hmm.
So that was the first thing I did. I chose the wardrobe to depict what I needed to depict, not only character wise, but in terms of the scene. And then I sat down the night before, and I was like, okay, how can I show the actual death? And I kid you not, like I sat down on a chair, and I did the scene, that whole thing, and showing the imagining that gruesome feeling.
Right.
And Michael, exactly what I imagined is exactly what happened in the room. I walked into the casting room, and there was a chair
Mm-hmm.
in the middle of the room, and they explained the scene, and in my head I thought, this is exactly what I imagined. I know exactly what I'm going to do.
Mm-hmm.
I i know what I'm going to do. And
That's
we
great.
did it. We did it like 2 or 3 times. It was the first audition, and I want to say actually it was a pre-audition, because the casting director Nina Gold wasn't even present. I auditioned for Nina Gold's assistant and the
Okay.
camera guy. Anyway, so I left the casting, and a few days later, I got a call from my agent saying they canceled all callbacks. They're going with you. I got it. So I booked. Game of Thrones was the easiest casting I've ever done in my life.
Wow. That's awesome.
Honestly,
It was
it
meant
was
to be.
it was 5 minutes long, if
Yeah.
that. Let's say 8 minutes.
Yeah.
Um, The Lion King and Aida were the hardest by
Yeah.
far,
Very
by
physical
far,
too, right? Yeah.
extremely physical. But Game of
Mhm.
Thrones is the easiest casting I had.
Wow.
And I was prepared. I walked in, I gave them exactly what they were looking for. They canceled all callbacks globally because I
Wow.
think they were auditioning in the States as well.
Hmm.
And a few days later, I was actually, there was a break in between the casting and filming because they were considering extending my character. So
Oh,
they were considering not killing the character or not killing the character immediately.
right.
So they had a break for a few days to deliberate how they could fix that within the script.
Hmm.
And even when I was on set, I overheard discussions. I remember when we were just about to film, the first day of filming was the scene where I walk in and the harpy comes down the
Hmm.
mountain. That was all on green screen, but they did. It was a room full of sand, like a huge
Right.
room, and I had to
Hmm.
stand in the middle of the sand, and I was just standing there. And honestly, I didn't know what scene we were going to do, but I was very professional. I was like, okay, let me see if they're actually going to tell me what we're filming,
Hmm.
because the whole thing was so secretive.
Right.
Anyway, so I'm
Where
standing there,
where did the filming happen?
Northern Ireland,
Okay.
Northern Ireland for that scene and a few others, and then Croatia for the rest. So I was standing in the sand, and there were people running around, running around, running around. And the director came in and was like, "Who is White Rat? Oh, you're White Rat? Nice to meet you. Nice to meet you." Blah, blah, blah. And then he walked off. And then I heard them talking behind me. They were like, "Yeah, he's a good Unsullied, huh? He's one of the best we've had. Maybe we shouldn't kill him. Should we kill him? Do you think we should kill him? I don't know. But maybe we should." I heard this conversation behind me, and I'm like, I was standing there going, "You definitely don't have to kill me. Like
Right.
I I could stay alive." I was just thinking this in my head.
Yeah.
But I heard them having the conversation. I was like, "Yeah, he's one of the best we've had, right? Right?
Mhm.
He's really, really good, really strong. He's a really strong guy. Where's he from? Oh, Jamaica? Interesting." And then, it's, and then right after the conversation, like I heard them whispering behind me. They're like, "Action!" And I was like, I put up my hand. At that point, I was like, "I'm so sorry, but what scene are we doing?" And then he ran up to me and I was like, "Okay, this is happening," etc., etc. So Game of Thrones was a really interesting experience, and it signaled a shift in my life, really, because my life changed overnight.
Wow.
In the way that the Mahabharata signaled a change in my life, in the way that
Hmm.
um, the Lion King signaled a change in my life, and in the way that that film I did with Ashley Walters signaled a change in my life, because that was my first taste of being on film.
Right.
And by the way, the Game of Thrones was the second ever in-person casting I ever had for a film production,
Okay.
and the one with Ashley Walters was the first. So by the
Hmm.
time I got to Game of Thrones, I had only ever done one previous film and television casting in person, but I had
Hmm.
done tons of commercial castings. So I knew what it was like to go into the studio, and tons of them. So I knew the studio process. I just
Okay.
had to transfer it to the film and television
Okay.
um, setting.
So, what made you decide to pick up and go to LA?
Um, uh, the offers just came in. They're
This is
like
after Game of Thrones.
right after Game of Thrones. I'm talking the second day, the next day.
Wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. They were like, we saw you in Game of Thrones. We really like you. We think you could have a great future. Welcome to LA. Come to Hollywood. So and that and that's exactly how how it played out. Like I came to LA, and I'm not gonna lie to you. I my resume, not only Game of Thrones, but everything else prior to that, the Mahabharata, the film with Ashley Walters, The Lion King, working for Disney. When I came to LA, I realized very soon after arriving that I actually skipped several steps. I had met people who had been here years, 10 years. And, they didn't have an agent. They didn't have this, that, and the other. It's like I came in, signed. I came
Mm-hmm.
in. I was up and running the next day. I started
Wow.
doing castings. The first casting I had was for a show called The Librarians, which I think was just renewed
Mm-hmm.
on one of the networks.
Is that on Apple or where's that?
I can't remember at the time, but it was on one of the networks. And
I remember that show. Yeah.
right, so it was that first casting was terrifying because it was like 2 days after I had arrived in LA, and the casting was in Burbank. And
Mm-hmm.
you know, I took an Uber, and you're just driving on the streets, and you see all these movie billboards, and I literally was just thrust in the middle of it. I was
Mm-hmm.
very nervous. I remember being extremely nervous. And even then, I got down to the top 2 or 3 for that role because they told my manager. They called him and said, we really like Marcus. He's in the top 3 we're considering. So even that one, I almost booked that one. And then it took me a while to get accustomed to navigate LA and to understand the culture of casting here. There's definitely a culture of casting. It's
Mm-hmm.
like how Dubai and the United Arab Emirates, they have oil. LA
Yes.
has filmmaking. So
Right.
when you get here, it's the sense of film being an industry is so palpable. In the
Mm-hmm.
same way, it completely different to London in that you don't get up every day in London and see the Hollywood sign. You know,
Right.
you don't not you don't bump into like 100 people who are all actors and dancers and singers and all want to be famous and this and the other. It was very overwhelming when I
Mm-hmm.
when I when I first got here. Very very overwhelming. But I learned and I adapted and I learned the casting process, and I um, learned how to understand the culture of relating to casting directors and
Right.
this, that, and the other. So,
But
yeah,
did you go to LA for a short time first and then decide, or you just decided, okay, the offers are coming in, I'm
I,
going.
yeah, at first I just jumped on a plane and came over. To be completely honest with you, you know how I am.
Yes.
But having never visited the city before, and then that's when I was thrust into this whole mechanism. And then I went back to London for a while.
Mm-hmm.
I booked a show called Death in Venice, again with Royal
Right.
Opera, working as an actor. I did Carmen with English National. I did a television show called Mummy Mysteries for Channel 4, I believe, playing the
Okay.
role of Akhenaten. Um, and then I was getting ready to, things were starting to roll in London as well, but I was
Mm-hmm.
still doing castings in LA, like you do the self tapes.
Right.
And then the COVID thing happened, and
Yes.
I had to make a decision, whether I was going to stay in London or go back to LA. And I remember I packed my bag and I had bought the tickets and I went to bed and I was like, okay, I'll decide in the morning. Got up, looked at the suitcase, and I was like, okay, let's go. Picked up the suitcase, went to the airport literally, and I arrived like 2 hours before they closed the borders. It was the same day they were closing the borders. And it was the right decision because that very year, at the end of the year, was when I booked the series regular role of William French in Keeping Up with the Joneses with Vivica Fox and Eric Roberts.
Right.
And we started filming that in 2021, and then the show renewed for 2022. So it was actually the right decision,
Okay.
100% to
Good.
come back. But there was a very short initial period of adjusting to LA,
Mm-hmm.
and then I was working in London, and then I came back, and the second time I came back, I was much more experienced, much more grounded in what to expect from Los Angeles and the casting
Mm-hmm.
culture and the whole film industry, not
Right.
just the creative industry, the business side of it,
Gotcha.
how to navigate that. and yeah, booked Keeping Up with the Joneses, and that in itself opened up doors. I've done several things since then.
Okay.
So
Okay.
yeah, it's
So
gone quite well.
now that you're in LA, and you now have a sense of the space and the culture, what
Hmm.
what are some dream projects that either you haven't been offered yet, or maybe they haven't even been developed yet, but you're thinking, oh, this could be a really cool thing for me.
Yeah.
What are some of the,
Um,
the dream projects?
I've actually been in consideration for these dream projects, to be completely honest with you, and
Okay.
a few I've done. The latest project was a role of Candy in the family business on season 6, and to be completely honest with you, I didn't have to audition for the show. It was a direct booking. I was literally just walking around my apartment one day, had my phone in the kitchen, just went to check my messages. I was like, hey, you have an offer from the family business. Filming is tomorrow. I was like, what? And literally. And I was acting right opposite Michael Jai White,
Mm.
who's, big star. And
Yeah.
that was an interesting experience in and of itself. But I was prepared. I saw the character. The character was a villain. I play a lot of villains. I play a lot of very strong characters. I knew exactly what I was going to do with the character. I knew exactly what accent I was going to have. I knew where
Okay.
to place the character. He was from New York. He was like this kind of thing. I knew exactly what I was going to do.
Right.
The family business was interesting because everybody was just so relaxed with regards to filming,
Okay.
but so relaxed in the sense that there was no rehearsal before we got on set. So I was like, okay, and it was the same with Game of Thrones, by the way. So I saw what was happening, and I was like, you know what? There's a job that I need to do here because, first of all, I didn't audition for this, so I have to. It's not necessarily proving myself, but I have to prove myself,
Hmm.
because I skipped the whole process to get here. I have to
Right.
justify why I was brought on set. So
Hmm.
I went into the trailer and I was hyping myself up, and I was like, and I rehearsed by myself in the trailer. And then there was a break in filming. I went up on set as they were setting up, and I was behind a bar, and I felt out the space for myself, and I did rehearsal for myself. I
Hmm.
gave my own choreography. I carried my own wardrobe, by the way.
Right.
Um, and and when they were ready to film, it's a good thing I did that, because when they were ready to film, like I rehearsed the dialogue a little bit with Michael for like 5 minutes,
Right.
right?
Hmm.
And right after that, they were like, "Okay, let's go for a take." And I was like, "Right." And I assessed the situation, and I was like, "I need to do the preparation by myself." And it's a
Right.
good thing
Okay.
it's a good thing I did, because they were like, "Yeah, let's go for a take." I When they were setting up the cameras, I thought they were gonna say, okay, let's rehearse for the camera and then go for it. No, they were like, let's go for the take.
Let's go.
And
Okay.
it worked out brilliantly. At the end of it, Michael came up and he shook my hand, and we took pictures, and they introduced me to the showrunners and some of the studio execs and stuff like that. So I represented myself well, and I'm
Good.
very proud of that. Very, very
Good.
proud of it.
Good. Good.
Um, and apart from that, right before I did that, I filmed for Days of Our Lives, which is an iconic
The staple.
show. And I was so happy to be on Days of Our Lives. We grew up with Days of Our Lives, and it
Yes.
was always on the television in the background. So for me,
Yeah.
that was a personal achievement
Yeah.
for me. And right before, apart from that, I played the lead of Cody in a film which is an Amazon called Cabin Pressure, and
Okay.
once again the villain.
Hmm.
I a lot of fight scenes. So
Okay.
my lot of fight scenes. So all the training that I did in AIDA actually helped
Hmm.
for filming for Cabin Pressure. And the interesting thing is that I spoke with a fighting director, Cole McKay. We're having a conversation, and he was like, so tell me about your just casual conversation. And I said, I did a show called AIDA, and we did like 3 months of intense training and Japanese sword fighting, and And Cole was like, "Oh, interesting, interesting." And right after I told him all that information, the fight choreography suddenly became much harder. It suddenly
It's like, hey,
became much
you
harder
can
for the
handle it. Yeah, yeah,
yes, yeah, yeah. But the
yeah.
other guy that I was working opposite, Christopher is his name. He's very athletic as well. So we were, we were actually fighting. Like, a couple of those. He used a prop for one of the scenes where he had a telephone and he had to whack me with a telephone.
Wow.
It connected. The telephone
Okay.
connected 100%, and I remember vividly that happening because right after they said, "Okay, cut," everybody clapped and they're like, "That's the one, that's the one." And in my head, I kept on thinking it better because that thing hit my,
Yeah,
it was real.
yeah,
So a lot
yeah.
of the punches were real. A lot of the punches connected, and it was
Okay,
good. It was good. I'll definitely work with that production company again. It was the same production company that did the Joneses, so they called
okay,
me back for Cabin Pressure.
okay.
Yeah.
Great. So you had all this training, before you started. You had this all the training, for production in TV and film,
Mm-hmm.
and now you've been you haven't been using that part of it, but you've been using your other training, your dance and your
Yeah.
your acting.
Yeah.
But you still, you have your connection to your Jamaican roots and the
Mm-hmm.
culture that we grew up with, and with the all the folk culture that we're so close with in Ashe
Yeah.
and with Lantanet and Little People. So
Yeah.
now you want to develop your own project, right?
Mm-hmm.
So how is that process? Well, let me share even just the first one of the first things, because it's called
Yeah.
Ceremony,
Yeah.
right? Last of the Bloodline,
Yeah.
right? And I love this picture, because it just because of the movement, it just feels like there's movement and there's
Yeah,
flipping.
exactly. Yeah. Yeah. There's energy in the picture. Yeah.
Yeah, 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 yeah. So let me read the synopsis. Let me see if I can do it justice.
No, no. Yeah. Yeah. Go on.
Yeah. So this is a story outline. After their father dies mysteriously, Josh and Amel Perry are invited to the island of his birth for a remembrance ceremony. While navigating an estranged relationship, the half siblings clash over bloodline, infidelity, class, and inheritance.
Mm-hmm.
Following the main ceremony, the siblings have a heated argument. Amel scorns Josh for being an illegitimate child and
Mm-hmm.
blames his birth for ripping her family apart. She
Mm-hmm.
orders Josh to leave the family estate. That night, Amel is plagued by gruesome dreams of her past and is attacked by what seems like an esoteric force that eventually holds her in a state of sleep paralysis. Now
Mm-hmm.
alone in her dad's ancestral home, Amel languishes in her distress.
Mm-hmm.
As the community comes together for the final gathering, Amel's absence is noted. After being found almost comatose, Amel is aided by the mysterious ceremony leader, Mama.
Mm-hmm.
However, as the fervor surrounding Amel unfolds, it becomes clear that the only person who can save her is the last of her bloodline.
Right. Exactly. So the film, I'll explain that synopsis and then go into the
Yes.
how it came to be. So the film is a horror film, but it's
Okay.
not a horror film just for the sake of horror. It actually explores a fractured relationship between two half siblings who grow up in individually traumatic circumstances. The dad is the common denominator in both families. They grow up in separate families, but the
Okay.
dad, has an extramarital affair, and they have this
Hmm.
illegitimate child. And Amel is plagued by the trauma of the her own family falling to pieces because of this. She
Hmm.
sees the anger and hurt of her mom, and she grows up with that pain, even though she grows up with great wealth.
Right.
Josh, on the other hand, he's taken in by his aunt, but he grows up with the trauma of being shunned by his dad's family.
Right.
So he has his own battles that he's dealing with, and it explores really their own lives, but
Hmm.
also how they navigate each other when they do come together. So
Okay.
the horror element of it actually happens without giving away too much. It happens in Amel's dreams.
Okay.
And the horror element of it, I don't want to say too much, but anyway, it touches on the element of trauma
Okay.
and how internalized unresolved trauma can have an extremely negative impact on one's being, the soul, the spirit, everything. And in a sense, you can really begin the process of killing yourself if you don't deal with that past trauma.
Right.
So
Right.
that is what it explores, and that is what some of the characters go through,
Right.
and this that, and the other. That's certainly what ML goes through.
So.
But in the middle of that, they travel to the island of his birth, their dad's birth. He
Mhm.
dies mysteriously, and while on the island, they're navigating their own fractured relationship. So she hates him. She blames him for
Mhm.
her family falling apart. She throws him out of the house, but she's still herself dealing with these strange dreams and nightmares. And at a certain point, she's alone in the house and she has the dream and the nightmare, but she can't wake up. And
Right.
that's when the whole horror element starts. The whole thing is
Mhm.
about trying to save her from what is happening in the dreams, because whatever happens in the dreams is actually having an effect on her in real time.
Okay. Okay.
So yeah, so that's the exploration.
So screenplay you wrote. You wrote the screenplay.
I wrote the screenplay. It started off as a short film
Okay.
initially. It was
Mhm.
just a concept, just an idea. I started writing it late 2020, and I sent it randomly to some producers I knew, and they called back and said, this concept is amazing. What do you think about making it into a full length script? And
A
in my
feature.
head, I
Okay.
was like, I studied film production, but screenwriting is a whole different mechanism.
Mhm.
And I said, well, I've never written a script, but I'm gonna try. And little by little, the story kind of unfolded. The story came to me, and it unfolded, in its own way. I observed people around me. I observed society. Think of it this way, and this is a random story, but Arnold Schwarzenegger had the kid outside of his marriage.
I think I've heard
Um,
that. Yeah.
right, and so the situation with the siblings is something very similar to that. So
Mhm.
he has his regular family, and then he had the affair with the housekeeper, and he had I can't Joseph Bandana or something like that. So he has
Mhm.
this son on the side.
Okay.
And there was an event that the whole family went to recently, and it was reported in a newspaper that Arnold's legitimate family had a whole family picture together, but
Right.
Joseph wasn't included, so he was shunned.
Ah.
So this didn't play into the script, but it's something that touches on real life experiences.
Right. Right. Right.
So that is one of the elements that's included in the script. The
Mhm.
horror element of it is something that comes out of that and comes out with trying to heal the trauma that is associated with the different elements that you're
With the
dealing with
fracture of the yeah. Family.
within this
Mhm.
family dynamic.
Gotcha.
How ceremony and the culture plays into it is, um, well, the remembered ceremony itself takes the shape of, I guess, what we would regard in Jamaica as like a Kumina-esque
Right.
ceremony. I don't really
Mhm.
want to call it a Kumina ceremony because they're very specific
Right.
traditions and themes,
Exactly.
and there's a lot of meaning around it. So I'm
Mhm.
very careful not to say it is a Kumina ceremony. It's a remembrance ceremony that takes the
Mhm.
shape of things that we're familiar with having grown up on the island
So
that
there
we
are
would
elements
associate.
of
There are
communal
elements of it,
ritual. Yeah.
yes.
Right. Right.
Um, and we're tapping into the ceremony leader. I grew up with somebody who is from that culture. Her name is Lanton Steins. I've
Mhm.
already spoken to her about playing the role of Mama,
Right.
who's a ceremony leader in the production, and fingers crossed, she's gonna be in it.
Awesome. Yeah.
Um, so we're talking about people who are from the culture, people who have knowledge of what it's like
Mhm.
to be in those settings. And so when I started to write the script, I was writing from a place of knowing. I had the cultural references. So what I
Right.
did was that I put these together and I started to create this story from there. I wasn't
Hmm.
writing about cultures or experiences which were alien to me. You know, maybe
Right.
the family dynamic that we're talking about, but I had seen examples of that, so I
Of
brought
course.
that
Right.
in. But in terms of um, the cultural aspect of it that was embedded in the story, these are things that I grew up with. So
Hmm.
I was writing from an angle of familiarity, an angle of knowing what I was talking
Right.
about. So I wasn't just
Okay.
making up something and
Right. Of course.
plucking it out of thin air. Yeah, and that allowed me to give the script a lot of authenticity in terms of the information that's in there,
Hmm.
and certainly
So,
some of the imagery. Yeah,
hmm, so you would play the lead, right? I mean, well, one of
Josh
the leads,
Perry. Yeah,
Josh, right?
yeah.
Yeah. Which is perfect. So now you're in a position. You're thinking about casting. You're thinking about funding. to,
Yeah,
because
so the
film is
script
not
is
cheap.
done.
Yeah.
I at a certain point in time, I reached out to my friend Carl Williams, who is a writer, a brilliant writer, and he
Yeah.
really helped me to tie the script together. He infused it with a lot of real cultural elements, you know, drawing from
Nice.
the countryside and the man on a
Hmm.
bicycle and you know, just little things like that are placed in and around the script that give it so much life and authenticity. So
Wonderful.
he's a co-writer on the script.
Hmm.
In terms of casting, well, fortunately, I've got myself in a position where I have um, certain contacts in the industry, and so
Right.
I have a director of photography that's interested. His name is Will Barrett. He shot the Hatchet films, the Hatchet horror films, and he's
Okay.
worked with Bruce Willis and a whole bunch of people. I've reached out to a friend of mine to see if she'd be interested in playing the lead. She was a recurring guest on Game of Thrones in season 5 and season 6.
Hmm.
But there are other suggestions for the lead as well. There's a girl by the name of Alexa Demi who
Okay.
is in Euphoria.
I can show that.
Because the
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely, because
Uh,
the film the way it's going to be shot will tie into that whole Gen Z imagery, if you know what I mean. I don't know if you've ever
right.
watched Euphoria, but it ties into that energy. That's certainly the energy that is surrounding the lead girl, Amel.
Gotcha.
Um, so it would be great if she could do it. But I've already reached out to my friend who was in Game of Thrones, and she's extremely interested. I reached
Okay.
out to another friend of mine who was a lead in the Netflix series Griselda,
Hmm.
and he's interested. He sent in a letter of interest. And apart from that, you know, I have some other connections.
Okay. Is that
You
is
know,
that that
people.
that's Harry who was
Harry
who
Carter,
was
yes, he was
okay.
in. What's the name of the show with Channing Tatum? Um, what's the name of that film? With anyway, he was in a film with Channing Tatum,
Okay.
um, and
Hmm.
he's agreed to be in it as well. And there are other people as well who
Okay.
I've spoken with, who I've worked with,
Yeah.
who you know have a certain reputation in the industry,
Yes. Yes.
who
Yes.
are very interested.
Which you need. Yes. Of
And
course. Yeah.
yeah, and I have a producer who's guiding me, who's worked on films with Eric Roberts and Ron Perlman and a whole bunch
Right.
of people. Um, and in terms of the Jamaican cast, I've spoken to Lantoinette. I spoke with her a while ago,
Hmm.
and I'd be very interested in her playing the role of Mama in the
Right.
production. And of course, I have connections with a whole bunch of authentic talent in Jamaica, singers and dancers
Right.
and
Of course.
Ashe and Lakadko. And
Mhm.
so, you know, these are all things that I thought about while I was reading the script. I
Yeah.
wasn't just thinking about writing a good script and a good story. I was also
Mhm.
thinking about how practical the story would be. How realistically would I be able to make this project?
Mhm.
Um, and I guess for somebody outside of the culture, if you haven't grown up in Jamaica or grown up around Caribbean culture, if you're writing as an outside experience that you've just observed secondhand, that would be quite a difficult process. But the fact that I have got myself in a position where I have these contacts on the ground, and once
Mhm.
funding is in place, then I can go to the process of pulling these contacts together. It's very, very doable. very
Yeah.
global. So not only in Jamaica, but also in the US. You know, I've worked here, I've worked in London, I've worked in Jamaica. So these are all practical things that I thought about before finishing the script and before even starting the story, to be honest.
So the big stage now is it's the funding, the money, money,
The,
money.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. But I do have some outlets, you know, some sources that I'm having meetings with, and the meetings actually started a few months ago.
Great.
So there's definitely movement in that direction. But this is where an understanding of the business comes into being, because it's not only having contacts or having relationships with certain named actors or producers or cameramen even for the project. It's also writing a story that has emotional leverage.
Right.
So the way the business is going now, you know, if you're going to pitch to a streamer or if you're going to pitch to a theater, we're not aiming for a theatrical release. Maybe a theatrical release in Jamaica or the Caribbean,
Mm-hmm.
but certainly for the streaming services, Netflix, Apple TV, etc.
Right.
These outlets are more inclined to, I think, show projects that have very specific cultural reference and cultural weight. So at the very least, the Jamaican audience, the Caribbean audience, the Latino audience, they're captive.
Mm-hmm.
Because the culture speaks to a lived experience that this community will be able to identify with. And then in
Right.
terms of the emotional aspect of the family drama, etc., that's when it expands to a global audience. And so I think making the project specifically culturally relevant is what
Mm-hmm.
also makes it saleable,
Right.
because
Okay.
you're coming in with a project that already has a core audience. But the other elements of it that are more of a general theme, family dynamics, brother and sister fighting with each
Mm-hmm.
other, the horror element, that widens the scope of the impact and reach of the film.
Great.
So that's something that I've grown to understand in terms of film marketing, in
Mm-hmm.
terms of writing projects, in terms of creating projects. First of all, I've learned that you create from a space of your own understanding. You use the resources that are around you in terms of actors, you know, in terms of camera people, you know, etc. And
Mm-hmm.
then you focus on making a project which is potentially already has a captive audience. But you
Yeah.
writing from your space of your own understanding will already give you that, because you're already writing from a cultural perspective.
Right.
And
Yeah.
within that cultural perspective are the people of that culture. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. That's great. Well, I mean, I can't wait. I can't wait
Me too.
for it to pick up the pace with this production. I think it's
Yeah, I
going to
mean, you're
be
involved as well with the music,
yeah,
so of course
it's going to be exciting to see.
you're one of the persons I think I reached out to first, actually. You know,
Yes, 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 yes. We've
when
been
the script
talking.
wasn't even finished yet. So I just wanted to test the waters. You know, when I reached out to you, I was like, let me send Michael the script to see if he thinks it's interesting, to see if I really have a connection to the people that I think can help me with it.
Yeah,
And you liked it, and Lantoinette loves it.
yeah.
Lantoinette hasn't read the script yet, but she loves the concept of it,
It's not,
etc.
yeah.
And so I know for a fact that I've spoken with Ashe Davis,
Oh,
you know,
great.
who's a singer and an actress in London right now.
Yeah.
Because there are several roles in there for singers and, you know, the
Okay.
drummers and stuff like that. So I've tested the waters a little bit just to see if
Mhm.
once the money is there and I
Yeah,
can make that official call, like everybody will be on board. So I've
we'll be on
already
board.
tested a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great.
Hmm.
Well, Marcus, our time is coming to a close. Thank you
Oh, wow. Yeah,
again
no
for
problem.
saying yes. And
Yes.
before I finish, thank you. I have to do my little closing spiel. So,
Yeah, yeah.
so let me do that.
Do your
Um,
thing.
so, thank you everybody for joining me on this episode of Mike's Moment of Season 2. What a gift it was to spend time with my friend Marcus Blaine, an actor and creative who brings depth, courage, and truth to every role he embodies. But if today's conversation resonated with you, please take a moment to follow, rate, and share the podcast. Your support helps these stories reach even further, and it truly makes a difference. So don't forget to explore more of what we're creating. Oh, and check out my new avant-garde release, On the God, now available on all platforms. So thank you again for listening. Thank you for supporting the arts. And thank you for being part of this community. Until next time, keep creating, keep exploring, and keep finding meaning in your moments. Thank you so much, Marcus.
No problem, man. I had fun, man. It was good.
Yay.
And congrats on the show as well.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm Michael Sean Harris. I hope you're entertained and informed, and that you feel inspired to join me again and again in my moments of